This is Genevieve Davis. We're looking at the work of Rosalba Carriera, who started out as a lace maker designing patterns with her mother, who was a lace maker, and then she started doing these little oil miniatures that we're looking at right now. And then later on she started doing pastel oil portraits, and this was something that hadn't been done before. And so under the master's hand, we see here in this larger portrait that we have beautifully rendered flush tones, jewels, fabrics, hair, in a very elegant portrait style that she was very, very popular for, and did hundreds and hundreds of portraits. This next portrait is a portrait of a fashionable actress in a role where you can see she's cutting her hair as part of what's going on in the play. Maybe she's going to send that lock of hair to somebody. And here we have a fashionable young man about town. Here's a very young lady of fashion. And this lady is dressed a la Turk. The clothing in the 1700s was very restricted for women. It was hard to move around with those corsets and all the poundage of fabrics. And so some ladies of fashion decided to adopt the clothing of Turks, and they wore a very loose gown and a loose robe over that, and it was very comfortable. And it was also very sexy for the day because it revealed more of the body than you would ever see in a corset. Carriera was also popular with gentlemen on the Grand Tour who were visiting from Great Britain, and they liked to have their portraits done by her wearing beautiful Venetian clothing, and then they would send that back to or take it back with them to Great Britain as a gift to relatives or friends. Here we have another gentleman on the Grand Tour. He's wearing a mask slipped under his hat, his three-cornered hat, and actually this was considered a disguise. So if you met this gentleman on the street and you knew him, you were not supposed to greet him if he had that mask tucked in his hat. He was still considered to be incognito. And you can see he's wearing a nice fur-trimmed garment. It is chilly up in Venice and damp, so his garment is completely lined with fur to keep him warm in the day before central heating. Another kind of portrait that Rosalba did was these florid portraits of these beautiful, lush women, often with their breasts bared. These were supposed to be sort of allegorical, mythical representations of goddesses and nymphs, and at the same time they were probably also inspired by the famous courtesans of Venice, who were these glamorous ladies who would entertain gentlemen and trying to get as many men to fall in love with them as they could. And there may have been some sex involved in it and some money exchanging hands. They were very rich women, but they weren't considered prostitutes like the women on the street were. Here's a lovely portrait of a courtesan. This painting is in Chicago, so you can see it. It's in America, where the parrot is revealing the breast of the lady, and you can see she's drenched drenched in pearls that are part of the trappings of her profession, because these women were very wealthy. And you can see she's also very young. Courtesans usually started out about age 14 or 15, and they didn't last very long in that profession because of all the occupational hazards with jealous lovers and also with venereal diseases. Of course, some of these paintings were commissioned by the courtesans themselves, and you may be wondering why everybody's blonde in Venice. That's because they really treasured blonde hair up there, and if their hair wasn't blonde naturally, they might powder it to look blonde, or they might go up on the roof with a hat that had the center cut out of it, and they would drape their locks over the wide brim of the hat and bleach out their hair, sometimes with an extra chemical added, and then the wide brim of the hat would protect their complexion, which was supposed to be by the rules of fashion, very white. And here we have a portrait of the young King of France. If you were a portrait painter and you were commissioned by royalty to paint a portrait, that was pretty much the best thing that could happen to you, because everyone would want to have their portrait painted by you after that. And that is in spite of the fact that sometimes royalty did not pay at all or were very slow in paying. Rosalba was also commissioned to paint this portrait of the King of Poland. He was probably her biggest patron. He commissioned 150 portraits from her studio, and those are now collected and are in a museum in Poland. She also painted the portrait of Antoine Watteau when she was in Paris. He was another painter, a French painter. He liked to paint the Italian Commedia dell'arte. He liked to paint actors at work. You can see that Antoine was very pale in this portrait, and that's because he died rather young of tuberculosis. So he must have been close to the end of his life here. And you can see she's really given a nice soulful quality to this portrait. And now I'm showing you a few paintings by Antoine Watteau so you can get a feeling for how lively and wonderful his work was. This last painting is a self-portrait of Rosalba. Actually, it's the second to last painting. You can see that she didn't sugarcoat anything when it came to doing her own self-portrait. She was just a plain-looking gal out to make a living, and she didn't need to make herself look glamorous because she just had the glamorous people coming to her to commission her work. And this last portrait is a portrait of her as winter, and she's in the winter of her life as well. In addition to being a highly sought-after artist whose work was commissioned by heads of state, Rosalba also contributed to the profession of portrait painting by using pastels for the first time in a highly artistic manner, and there were many artists who followed in her footsteps afterwards.